I like these better with Trump. I really do. I don't know that anyone's vote was changed tonight. Watching a vice presidential debate.
I want to answer the question, but I want to actually give an introduction to myself a little bit because I recognize a lot of Americans don't know who either one of us are.
That's how you get the single cat ladies back on your side. It's matchup with a series of mock debates. They had stand-ins for the moderators, and Pete Buttigieg played J.D. Vance, which is funny because J.D. Vance, he must hate the idea that a gay man was playing him. And wearing less eyeliner than he. I kept expecting him to reach down behind his podium and come up with a corn dog and a baby pig.
Imagine building your entire career criticizing political opportunists, only to become the biggest one yourself. That's exactly what happened to J.D. Vance, and Jimmy Kimmel just called him out in the most savage way possible on live TV. This wasn't just another celebrity roast, it was a surgical demolition of a politician's credibility using his own words against him. Kimmel compared Vance's defense of Trump to watching someone defend the very person they once warned everyone about. The audience was in stitches, but the message was dead serious. Politicians will say literally anything to get elected. Before we move on, I'd like to ask you a small favor. If you appreciate this content, please take a second to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Over 98% of you watch the videos without subscribing. It costs you nothing, but it makes a huge difference to us. So, did you click the subscribe button? Great. Thank you so much. Now, back to the video. Did you know that J.D. Vance, Trump's running mate, used to think Trump was absolutely terrible?
And, it's difficult to prepare for a debate in general, but it's especially difficult when the other guy might blurt out that Puerto Ricans are poisoning our Halloween candy or...
I agree with a lot of what Senator Vance said. Governor, I agree with you. I agree with that.
And I think that Governor Walz and I actually probably agreed.
Well, Trump is not going to like that at all. Women shouldn't be allowed to swim during menstruation. But he didn't do any of those things. In fact, both candidates were pretty darn polite to each other.
I'm not exaggerating here. Vance once called Trump noxious and flat-out anti-American. That's right. The same guy who now follows Trump around like a lost puppy once thought he was basically un-American. Talk about a complete 180. Let's rewind a bit. Before J.D. Vance became Trump's cheerleader, he was a Yale-educated author who made his name with Hillbilly Elegy, a book about growing up poor in Appalachia. He was seen as this thoughtful conservative voice who could bridge the gap between coastal elites and working-class Americans. Back then, Vance wasn't shy about criticizing Trump and the political circus around him. In fact, Vance didn't just dislike Trump, he was genuinely worried about him. He straight up said, "My biggest problem with Trump is that his message to the right is anti-conservative and in some ways anti-American." Ouch! He even warned that Trump was leading the white working class to a very dark place. Those aren't exactly the words of a fan, are they? But then something magical happened. And by magical, I mean Vance realized there might be a Senate seat in it for him if he kissed the ring. Suddenly, the thoughtful Yale grad who worried about Trump's influence started saying things like, "Trump is always right." It's like watching someone who spent years warning about the dangers of smoking suddenly become a cigarette spokesperson. The transformation is honestly kind of impressive in its shamelessness. Remember when you were a teenager and your mom found your secret diary where you wrote mean things about your best friend? That awkward feeling is basically Vance's entire political career now, except instead of apologizing, he's pretending he never wrote it. One of the most jaw-dropping examples of Vance's flip-flop was when he compared supporting Trump to a heroin addiction. Yes, really. He basically said Trump supporters were like addicts making harmful choices. Now he's Trump's personal hype man, defending literally everything the man says or does with robotic precision. It's like watching someone who used to warn about the dangers of cults suddenly show up in a weird robe selling flower necklaces at the airport. Even more telling was Vance's stance on the 2020 election. In a CNN interview after Biden won, Vance was remarkably reasonable, saying, "I really don't see any reason to think that this is going to become chaotic. I think that when Biden is inaugurated, people will accept it." Fast forward to now, and he refuses to acknowledge Trump's loss, joining the chorus of election deniers he once criticized. How does someone make such a complete 180 without getting severe whiplash? Did Vance have some kind of political epiphany? Did Trump save his life in a dramatic swimming pool incident we don't know about? Or is it just the most obvious case of political opportunism we've seen in years? Jimmy Kimmel didn't hold back in his assessment. He compared watching Vance cling to Trump like a lifeboat to seeing a man desperately trying to rewrite his own Wikipedia page in real time while the receipts are everywhere. That's the perfect description of what we're witnessing. A man frantically trying to erase his past while everyone can still see it. The most brutal comparison came when Kimmel likened Vance to Diddy's defense attorney, someone forced to defend the increasingly indefensible with a straight face. Imagine signing up to defend someone, then watching as the list of things you need to justify keeps growing longer and more ridiculous by the day. That's basically Vance's current job description. Comparing Vance to Diddy's defense attorney was just Kimmel warming up. The real comedy massacre was still coming. What happens when a late-night host with zero patience for phonies gets access to every embarrassing clip from a politician's past? Pure entertainment for viewers and absolute nightmare fuel for J.D. Vance. Jimmy Kimmel didn't just throw a few jokes at Vance's flip-flopping. He performed a methodical dismantling that should be studied in political comedy masterclasses. With the precision of a surgeon holding a comedy scalpel, Kimmel dissected Vance's entire political identity piece by hypocritical piece. Each punchline wasn't just aimed for laughs. It was designed to expose another layer of Vance's opportunistic transformation. The genius of Kimmel's approach was how he let Vance's own words and actions do most of the heavy lifting. Why create jokes when the reality is already absurd? Kimmel's team compiled a devastating montage that juxtaposed Vance's earlier intelligent, measured critiques against his current robotic defense of everything Trump.
I finished watching the vice presidential debate between two men who couldn't be much more different. One of them called Donald Trump a reprehensible idiot who shouldn't be president.
First of all, Tim just said something that I agree with. I agree. And I actually think I agree with you. I actually agree with Tim Walz.
In some ways, you can't help but you kind of feel sympathy for J.D. Vance having to defend Donald Trump, who he himself openly denounced.
Side by side, the contrast wasn't just stark, it was downright jarring. One of Kimmel's most brutal observations focused on Vance's complete image overhaul. He went from sipping lattes in Silicon Valley to suddenly acting like the lost member of Duck Dynasty. Kimmel quipped to an audience howling with laughter. The joke landed because it perfectly captured how Vance shed his coastal elite persona like a snake shedding skin, replacing it with a hastily constructed MAGA-friendly character. Even Vance's voice became fair game. Kimmel mercilessly mocked how Vance suddenly developed a convenient Southern drawl that was mysteriously absent during his Yale days and Silicon Valley venture capitalist career. It's amazing how quickly you can develop an accent when there are votes on the line, Kimmel joked, as clips played showing Vance's voice growing progressively more down-home as his political ambitions evolved. The comedy got even more cutting when Kimmel described Vance as a knockoff political figure slapped together in a focus group. That line wasn't just funny, it was a perfect encapsulation of how manufactured Vance's new identity appears. It's as if someone studied what MAGA voters respond to and created a politician-shaped product designed to check all their boxes, regardless of authenticity. What made Kimmel's Takedown so effective wasn't just the jokes themselves. It was how each one exposed a deeper truth about political opportunism. When Kimmel compared Vance's rebrand to a gas station Rolex, he wasn't just making a funny comparison, he was highlighting how painfully inauthentic Vance's transformation appears to anyone who's been paying attention longer than 5 minutes. The audience wasn't just laughing, they were witnessing a masterclass in accountability through comedy. With each clip and punchline, Kimmel systematically demolished the carefully constructed image Vance has been trying to sell to voters. It wasn't just comedy, it was a public service announcement about political integrity wrapped in jokes. By the time Kimmel finished his monologue, Vance's reputation was, in Kimmel's own words, left in smoking rubble. The phrase perfectly captured the devastation Kimmel had inflicted, not through meanness or cheap shots, but simply by highlighting the glaring contradictions in Vance's own words and actions. There's nothing more damaging to a politician than their own inconsistency played back for laughs. What's particularly impressive about Kimmel's approach is that he didn't need to fabricate anything or exaggerate. The comedy came from simply presenting reality in a way that highlighted its absurdity. Vance himself provided all the material Kimmel needed. The host just packaged it with perfect comedic timing and delivery. For viewers, it was a perfect storm of entertainment and information. People who hadn't been following Vance's dramatic transformation got a crash course in political shapeshifting. Those already familiar with his flip-flops got the satisfaction of seeing them called out on national television with no mercy shown. Vance's story proves the old political rule just doesn't work anymore. Deny, deny, deny until people forget.
He looks like all of their viewers. He looks like he... So they are now desperate to exploit any tiny bit of oddness they can conjure up. It's like taking your kids apple picking. About halfway through, you're like, okay, you know what? This sounded like it was gonna be fun, but what's the point? Walls and Vance, they stuck to the issues. They showed each other a lot of respect. It was very boring. He had a serious haircut, too. It looked like somebody got out the Flowbee before the debate tonight.
That strategy crashed harder than a laptop running Windows Vista because, as Kimmel so perfectly put it, the internet never forgets JD, and neither does Jimmy Kimmel. This wasn't just a punchline. It's the reality check that politicians like Vance keep missing in the digital age. Remember back in the good old days when politicians could just pretend they never said that controversial thing? They'd wait for newspaper clippings to yellow and fade, for VHS tapes to get recorded over with episodes of Friends. Those days are as dead as JD Vance's credibility after Kimmel's takedown. The digital footprint is basically a political tattoo you can't laser off. Every interview, every hot take, and every angry tweet lives forever in the digital world. Poor JD thought he could pull a quick wardrobe change from Trump critic to Trump superfan without anyone noticing. But the internet is like that friend who keeps embarrassing photos of you from college. It remembers everything. What makes this particularly brutal for Vance is how accessible all his past statements are. Journalists, researchers, and apparently late-night comedy writers can find everything with a few keystrokes. It's like Vance wrote his own comedy material for Kimmel, leaving a trail of anti-Trump breadcrumbs so obvious that following them required zero detective work. Every "Trump is corrosive" and "Trump is a danger to democracy" comment is just sitting there, waiting to be rediscovered when convenient. Or inconvenient if you're JD. The side-by-side comparison format has become comedy gold for shows like Kimmel's. Why write jokes when politicians deliver the punchlines themselves? All it takes is playing a clip of Vance condemning Trump, then immediately showing him praising Trump for the exact same behavior. No setup needed. The contradiction is the joke. The audience doesn't need complex political analysis. They just need to see the before and after to understand the political opportunism happening right before their eyes. When confronted with these contradictions, Vance's strategy has been, well, not great. Rather than addressing the obvious flip-flopping, he's tried to dismiss the criticism or change the subject. But in the comedy world, that just makes you look even more ridiculous. It's like getting caught with your hand in the cookie jar and claiming you were just checking to make sure the cookies were still there. Nobody's buying it, and comedians like Kimmel can smell the desperation from a mile away. The most ironic part, when Vance and his supporters can't actually defend his about-face, they resort to crying cancel culture. As Kimmel hilariously pointed out, JD's fans did what they always do, cry cancel culture while trying to cancel a comedian. It's the political equivalent of flipping the Monopoly board when you're losing, a desperate move that only highlights how weak your position really is. This pattern reveals something fascinating about our current political moment. When politicians can't defend their inconsistencies, they try to make themselves the victims. But the internet's memory makes this tactic increasingly ineffective. You can't claim persecution when there's video evidence of you saying exactly what you're now denying. The receipts are too clear, too permanent, and too easily shared. What we're witnessing is a new form of political accountability, one that doesn't come from traditional watchdogs but from comedy shows armed with nothing more than politicians' own words. When news programs might hesitate to call out contradictions so bluntly, comedians like Kimmel step into the void, creating devastating montages that expose political opportunism through humor. Late-night comedy has unexpectedly become one of our strongest safeguards for political integrity. Not through complex policy analysis or hard-hitting interviews, but simply by showing politicians exactly what they said when they said it and letting the audience decide if today's version of the politician matches yesterday's. It's accountability through archive footage delivered with a punchline. For Vance, Kimmel's comedy wasn't just embarrassing. It was a stark reminder that reinventing yourself politically has become nearly impossible. The digital paper trail follows you everywhere, ready to be compiled into a devastating montage at a moment's notice. What makes this particularly effective is that Kimmel doesn't need to tell the audience Vance is being inconsistent. He can show them, letting Vance's own words make the case. What we just witnessed with Jimmy Kimmel's takedown of JD Vance isn't just late-night comedy gold. It's what happens when political phonies meet the unforgiving spotlight of truth. Kimmel nailed it when he said Vance's flip-flop was the political equivalent of selling your soul at a garage sale and throwing in your self-respect as a free bonus. Ouch, that's going to leave a mark. In this political circus, comedians have become our truth tellers. As Kimmel himself put it, comedy is truth's best friend, and nothing exposes a phony faster than a punchline that lands a little too close to home. The Vance saga proves that in 2024, you can change your accent, your talking points, and even your personality. But those embarrassing old videos? They're forever, baby. So next time you see a politician doing the "I never said that" dance, just grab some popcorn. There's probably a comedian somewhere with the receipts, ready to turn political opportunism into tomorrow's viral clip. Sorry, flip-floppers, the internet's memory is longer than your principles.